All right, welcome everyone into another exciting episode of the Step Up Podcast. I'm not Kent Kniebel, but I'm excited to be here with the man, Kent Kniebel. Yeah, man, we go way back to the PDI days. I guess this is a little bit of like a late night show, talk show host takeover.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm Stephen Colbert or who I'm supposed to be today, but anyways, buddy, it's good to see you. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. So I think for the audience, right, Adam and I are former coworkers, good friends, and Adam agreed to come on today as the guest host for this episode.
Right. I'm so used to being the sidekick, so making me the main character, man. This is amazing. This is corporate side quest coming to real life right here.
There we go. I like it.
So,
but before I go into my intro, and we'll have you on in the future, but why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself first before I fully turn everything over to you?
Yeah, so for folks that are following Kent but who have no clue who this guy is, so I spent about 20 years in the leadership development space. So I started my career at Personnel Decisions International, PDI, whoop whoop, for any alum out there. I'm actually a Midwestern guy, so born and raised in South Dakota. So if you've been out to the Black Hills area, seen Mount Rushmore and all that. And then I migrated over to Minnesota. So I went to the University of Minnesota, did my undergrad, my graduate. I think at one time I talked Kent into joining the Masters of Education program there in the Human Resource Development Partner. What's up? So anyways, love my time in the Midwest, but man, 12 frozen, cold, blizzardy tundras later, like I'm out. Peace. So I thought I might move to New York or Chicago or San Francisco, started falling in love with the idea of San Francisco. But then I got a call from Susie Brock, someone who was coaching us, a dear friend at the time. And she said, what do you think about something further west of San Francisco? I'm like, what? Like Hawaii? What are we talking about, Susie? And she mentioned that there was an opportunity in Hong Kong. So that actually took me on, I thought it was going to be a 6-month chapter, a 5-year chapter out in Asia Pacific, starting kind of servicing Greater China. So a lot of time based out of Hong Kong, and then eventually an APAC-wide role where I was cruising around to different cultures, different countries, supporting leadership assessment, leadership development, succession, kind of the whole kit and caboodle. And at that time, Korn Ferry had also acquired PDI. So I kind of have both experiences, kind of living at HQ, also going out to a field office, and then eventually made it back to the US, found my home in San Francisco. I've been out here for about a decade. We made a pandemic move, let's call it, about 5 years ago to the suburbs. And I'm a suburban dad with, salt and pepper beard and doing the things, man. So nice. Anyways, and I should say the last 6 years of my 20-year career was at Autodesk. So I joined kind of the technology sector, a phenomenal company, really do a lot of things right when it comes to culture, DEI, leadership development, just supporting and building a great place to work. So I led the manager enablement or manager development. So built programs to help people that went from individual contributors to first-time managers, and also partnered with several people to do some kind of bespoke offsites, speak with senior leaders, talk talent, all the things, man. So it's a great ride. And then maybe I'll end here. Last year, I was part of the tech layoffs, right? The statistics that everyone was seeing in the newspaper articles and all the TikTok reels. That was me. So my wife and I, inside of 6 days, both lost our jobs, 2 different tech companies, 2 different situations, but went from 2 W-2 incomes to nothing. And anyway, we kind of looked at each other. We were a little panicked in the moment. We went to Asia to go see her family. We took some time off to think about it. And then she doubled down. She's finishing, actually, she's on her last chapter, but she's writing a personal memoir and a book about her life coming from Vietnam and coming over to the States. She actually is an alumni of the University of Minnesota, which is kind of crazy. We never met. I don't know if you know that or not, but we met at a comedy club in Hong Kong. We were both doing comedy at the time. And anyways, I decided to double down in real estate. So I am actually, as you're talking to me right now, we're recording this kind of mid-late October. I'm under contract on my first boutique hotel. So talk about strapping on, your learning shoes. And, I think the best coaches, the best consultants, like they've done it before. So anyways, I'll stop there, but hopefully that's a little bit of a taste of who this guy is. I'm usually the sidekick, but thank you so much, Kent, for for having me on today to, again, guest host and hear a little bit about you, by the way, because I think
Yeah.
you do such a nice job on the Step Up podcast of featuring other people and sharing their stories. But quite frankly, I think it's time that somebody shot that camera right back at you, brother. So
Yeah, I appreciate, and I was going to say it's giving me an appreciation for being on the other side. I've only guested on one other podcast before, and you would think this would be a lot easier, but even in our pre-conversation, I'm like, how exactly is this going to go? So we'll see, we'll see. But
you're a natural,
I feel
man.
like
You're a great
I'm in good
storyteller.
hands. I feel like I'm in good hands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, we don't need to start all the way back in the crib or anything like that,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you heard my life story in 3 minutes. So give us your story, man. Like, where does
yeah.
it all start for you? What were some of the big major chapters and why are you doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I'll try to keep it simple enough. But I will shout out and say, hey, if you're interested in real estate and purchasing a boutique hotel, Adam puts out some really cool posts on LinkedIn, kind of along the journey of getting this hotel. So would encourage people to go check that out. So, but about
Thank you.
me, again, I will relinquish control again. So I am affectionately in what I call chapter 3 of my career. Chapter 1, similarly to you, Adam, being almost 10 years with PDI and Corn Ferry. So nobody starts their career at least at PDI at the time. So I would say, I was among the youngest consultants there back in '06 when I joined, and really learned the assessment side of the business. So I spent a big chunk of time doing simulation-based assessments for selection, development. I think you and I really met pretty early on, but particularly when I started dipping my toes into leadership development, workshop facilitation, got involved in some succession, high potential consulting while I was there. And to keep the story shorter, managed a team for some time while I was there. And I like to say, my very first team that I ever managed, my very first management experience was with a virtual team. And this was pre ubiquitous webinar, technology like Teams or Zoom. So this was, primarily phone calls, managing people
We're
over the
still
phone.
we're still doing that little alien telecom thing in the middle
Yes.
of a conference hall. Going,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Are you there, John?
You
Are you
there?
there? Are you on
Hello?
the phone?
Exactly. Oftentimes direct dialing, sometimes, and I still remember putting the phone number, comma, access code on people's calendars. So if they were lucky enough to be using a smartphone, you could click the button and it would dial and pause and put your code in. I don't know if you remember that.
Was it? Hey, real quick, just because this is fun for me to kind of go down memory lane. Was it Harry Brule that did had a secretary that didn't do emails? Or I remember coming in and Lou Quast. I mean, an amazing legendary figure. Got a ton of mentoring, coaching from him. But
Yeah.
he showed me his calendar, and it was still pen and paper. I felt like we were literally
Yes.
coming in. I
Yes.
was born in '81, so I'm
Yeah.
44.
Yeah.
Like we're this interesting generation where we're coming in where everyone was used to fax machines,
Yes.
pagers, like the old analog world. And then we showed up as kind of
Yeah.
young bucks going,
Yeah. Yeah.
hey, put me in, coach. And by the way, everyone's got no hair or gray hair and are talking about
Yes.
their hips and their grandchildren. And Kenzie and I are 20-year-olds going, we're kind of,
Unmarried, no children when we first got there.
and
Yeah.
by the way, all of our peer group, I don't know if this was true for you, but
Yeah.
they took jobs at Best Buy, at General Mills, at Target.
Yep.
They're 20-year-olds hanging out with 20-year-olds.
Yep.
Meanwhile,
Yep.
you and I are getting a Caesar salad
Yes.
with 65-year-olds. Now again, not to disparage, but just to point out, it was a very
100%.
interesting world to grow up in. And what I think, again, talk about just a learning cauldron where
Yes.
we went from 0 to 1,000 very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And I do remember you when you got a team, because we talked about as you were transitioning.
Mhm.
I always remember, Ken, you used to always rock a tie, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, God.
You dressed so impressively.
Yeah. Yes. Shirt and tie at all times. And a little less gray hair and a lot more gel or pomade. Mad Men was very popular at the time. I think I went there with that haircut. No, really good point though, because I don't think I play that up enough. I don't think I talk about that enough. So yes, I mean, to talk about Harry as well,
Any,
I think he was
yeah, and
dictating his reports into a
exactly.
phone still and having someone else type them. But to your point, right? My peer consultants, your peer consultants were probably 30 years older on average, right? I think there was a few of
Mhm.
us that were under the age of uh, 40, right? At the time, but the vast majority were, yeah, like 30 years our senior, right? But to that point, now, on the one hand, I think you probably just like me, I'm like teaching people how to use their computers, while, however, good trade off, while they're teaching me so much
Oh,
of the business, right?
learned
Um,
so much from PDI. So
right.
again,
Yeah. It was
Nina
like just like
Backer, Mark
constant.
Sokol, Donna DeMena. Come on,
Yep.
man. Chris
Yep.
Fisher. Like this
Yep.
place was just loaded. It's like the
Yep.
85 Bears or something. This was like a
Oh, yeah.
world class, like championship squad. So I'm
Oh,
so
amazing.
grateful for
Yeah. Yeah.
starting
And
there.
I had the unique position because when I first started, I was in more of a assessment shared services group or shared assessments. It was SAS, shared assessment services.
Mhm.
And while I was in the Minneapolis office, I was technically supporting the global company. So you're
Mhm.
throwing out all these Minneapolis names, and I'm not going to name drop like you, haha. But
Fine,
uh,
fine.
but like I was working with people in Texas, out east,
Yep.
overseas, the San Francisco office. So I think I had such a connection globally to folks too,
Yep.
and so just learned so much about leadership, leadership behavior, leadership development. Um, and then just for the sake of the story, I'm literally teaching people how to use their Windows computers. Um, but again, it was
Tech support.
a very good trade off. And realistically, when Korn Ferry acquired us, the median age at the organization dropped by about 20, 25 years, which was interesting. And when Korn Ferry acquired us, I actually made this move into the Korn Ferry Institute for a time, and I was a part of
Mhm.
this sort of scrappy team that was primarily rationalizing competing IP.
Mhm.
So I had this interesting opportunity to learn more sort of boardroom facilitation, so to speak, and design thinking facilitation. Um, as we were, say, like, because at that time, Korn Ferry had Lominger, and they had acquired PDI and Global Novations. And anybody that's listening that was at the third place, they acquired like 3 companies at one time. And at that time, PDI was the biggest acquisition before
Yep.
the Hay Group acquisition, which was then just a massively larger
On
acquisition.
Ninth House as well, right?
Yep. We had acquired Ninth House. Yep. But for example, Lominger had a competency
Mhm.
model. PDI had a competency model. So the
Mhm.
team that I worked on, we kind of fanned out to different uh, intellectual property corners to say, hey, we can't have 2 competency models, right? Like we need one. Yep. Yep.
Leadership architect was it? We got it down to 38, I
Yep.
think, which was crazy
Yeah.
because
Yep.
Lominger had 67, PDI had all this. So again,
Or we
how
had
do you
two different
rationalize
we had
and
two different
condense
potential
and
assessments too, right? We had our own assessment of leadership potential. I can't remember what PDI's was called actually, but and Korn Ferry had Via Edge,
yep.
and how do we bring them together?
What
Because
an
actually,
interesting
they actually,
time.
in some cases, it was choosing one thing over another. In some cases, it was putting them
Yeah.
together because
Yep.
we weren't, PDI wasn't measuring this other aspect of high potential that Korn Ferry was measuring, right? And they weren't measuring what we were measuring. So we actually, combined those to a best of both worlds. So, but to your point, right? So here, I met my wife while I was there as well, by the way. Shout
Hey,
out.
that's a good
Nikki.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so chapter 2 of my career, I went into
Yep.
HR because here I was, probably on the doorstep of my 30s, if not getting into my 30s. And, people are living longer, working longer. And so I was sort of sitting here looking at another maybe 30 years or more of work. And while I do miss PDI and Korn Ferry for sure, I was sort of like, I don't know that I want to be here for 40 years.
Mhm.
And so really started looking at wanting to get inside, get into the organization, into an HR role to see kind of how what we do comes to life truly on the inside. And I think I had this feeling as well of like, I was like, I wonder if I would like being a part of things from end to end versus feeling like I'm kind of paratrooping in to do one thing and then getting the heck out of there. So I'm going to speed this along a little bit, but I went into leadership development at Buffalo Wild Wings, where I was there for 2 years. They were sold. People were sort of getting their invite to move themselves to Atlanta or invited to go. And I quickly found a nice landing spot at Cargill, which I had wanted to work there for a number of years. Buffalo Wild Wings, super fun place to work. I love the restaurants. Inspire Brands now is the kind of the umbrella organization. But love all my people from Buffalo Wild Wings still to this day. Still, huge fan. Loved being able to do leadership development with regional leaders, with restaurant operators who just grew up in the business and never once were taught kind of some of the nuance of leadership development. They were certainly taught how to hire, how to fire, how to jump in on the line and, keep things moving if, a line cook called in sick. Anywho, jumped into Cargill where I'd wanted to be for a long time.
And by the way, I got to tell one B-dub story because, right on campus, I think I was maybe coming back from Hong Kong or something like that. I distinctly remember being over at a friend's house and The Hot Ones came out. And it was, I can't remember the guy's name, but it started on YouTube. I think it got picked up. It's on major networks now. That guy's incredible as this interviewer.
It's amazing.
10 questions with increasingly high Scovilles.
Yeah, I should probably be watching more of that because he is, interestingly, people point to him as being an amazing interviewer, actually. Yeah.
Oh, incredible. Because he does these deep cuts and again, reveals something in a pretty compressed amount of time, but it's educational, it's funny, it's entertaining. Watching Shaq or whoever just sweat it out, as they get to the big one. So anyways, I just remember distinctly us watching 4 or 5 of those and we go, we should go do this.
Oh man, I tried
the car. Dude, and we went to B-dubs on campus at the University of Minnesota, and I tried the hottest one they had. It was some ghost pepper or something. I have no idea. I am a mild or teriyaki sauce kind of guy. Yeah. That's what kind of gal I am. What you got, sweet and sour going?
I did the Blazing Challenge with a buddy of mine while I was working there. I was listen. My wing game is strong. How I eat,
it is.
I'm scientific about how I eat chicken wings, and so I went in very confident and failed miserably to finish the Blazing Challenge. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna move us.
Anyways, Let's move on. But I had to talk about. Come on, we you can't just work at the place and learn leadership stuff. No, I think it's worth telling the people that your wing game also doubled. From your time at B-dubs. So okay, let's move on.
Shout out. What is it? Spicy garlic. It's basically their medium sauce with extra garlic in it. Okay, so went to Cargill, did talent management there, right? So traditional-ish talent management that you see at a lot of larger organizations. So leading talent review meetings from pre-work through the meeting itself and identifying high potential talent, doing succession planning. I fell into a D&I role, which is a conversation for another time, but I was doing, a side project and was invited to apply to a job in D&I and particularly spent some time launching allyship and doing, running their sponsorship program, among other things. And then I made a jump to General Mills, where I spent a couple of years back in the talent management there, but there was a big D&I component to it. They wanted someone who had a D&I background. So again, doing full sort of talent cycle work with them. So leading the same, very similar talent review conversations, identifying top talent, high potential talent, successors for key roles, building out development plans for those folks, supporting the mid-year check-in process, individual development planning process, as well as got a little bit more experience. I did a little bit of this at Cargill, yes, but did a lot more of it at General Mills, did a lot of direct annual performance review consulting, right? So I was the one kind of both, attached at the hip with my comp consultant being kind of the bad guy around, are you really planning to go into that meeting over budget on your merit and bonus allocations? But really trying to also help consult around pay for performance. And then last July 2024, jumped out on my own And yeah, I've been sort of an independent consultant, splitting my time between executive coaching, leadership development, both design and facilitation of programs, um, and some assessment work, and so some of my own clients, some subcontracting work. Uh, and I've been focused a lot on some of my observations coming out of HR. One of my biggest observations coming out of HR, which is sort of what I wanted to talk about today. Um, and so I was sort of just saying, I across a couple different companies, and I was dabbling in this at Buffalo Wild Wings as well. They didn't have as many, specific departments running all these things. But really sitting down and identifying top talent, high potential talent. And I would say the one thing that I've seen across organizations that shout out to General Mills, how much time and effort they were putting into this, but it was the first place I landed where, at the director level, not across the entire organization, but certainly in the commercial space where I was supporting, it was the first place where as soon as someone was promoted to the director level, they were immediately enrolled in a primarily internal program, to support them in making the transition from manager to director.
Mm-hmm.
And I, having spent at that point probably 16, 17 years in sort of leadership development and HR, it was the first time in 17, 18 years where I saw an organization supporting people in making this transition from one level to the next. And knowing all the things we've talked about throughout the years, the royal we in the leadership development space, around how hard it is to make a transition from one level to the next, it had just sort of shocked me. Oh, this is the first place that I've actually seen support people in making that transition in a systematic way. And I just became really passionate about that. And I've focused, especially since I've left corporate America, so to speak, really trying to speak to and kind of hold the flame, or what have you, advocate for supporting leaders at that point of promotion.
What was it that you would say was different at General Mills that maybe was untrue at some other place? So you kind of point to systemic support. So I'm curious, what did that actually look like?
So it might have been, in particular, the volume of, or pace of talent movement at the company, like just how many people they promote. And I'm not sure. I've now had the chance to really dive into the research for it. I don't know if the research is what kind of was the impetus for them, or just their observations themselves. But part of what they do is in a lot of organizations do new manager assimilations, really sitting down with the new team to talk about their incoming manager and get any feedback, and walk through sort of a systematic approach to helping that person hit the ground running with the team. But what they were doing was also helping that person hit the ground running with understanding, what are my new goals and objectives, and what are my development areas, and how do I prioritize that development in order to hit the goals and objectives that I now need to hit as a leader, and elevate from one level to the next. Because, what I've seen firsthand in HR, we talked about it for 10 years at PDI, around like leaders operating down a level, right? The director really operating like a manager. But then you go into an organization, you see it happening, right? You see leaders having a hard time taking their hands off the wheel, a hard time delegating, wanting to be involved in everything. And there's different ways in which these changes show up at each level. So I'll shout out to Sharon Drotter and Knowles' tome of a book, The Leadership Pipeline, right? They very clearly talked about, at each level, and it's really easy to think about going from being an individual contributor to a manager. It's probably one of the most obvious. It's also one of the most difficult, one of the most obvious leadership transitions that someone needs to make, going from just caring about yourself and what you're getting done to having to, care for an entire team and what they're getting done, right? And classic example there is, going from being an individual contributor to a manager, but really trying to operate like a super individual contributor, right? You're just staying in, instead of helping 5, 6, 10 other people be great at their jobs, you're in there pushing the work along yourself, being great at their job. Like, I'm now being great at their job instead of helping them be great at their job. But that shows up at each level, right? You can then see a director operating like a super manager, right? I at General Buffalo Wild Wings, I literally heard regional managers say, I mean, I was a great store manager. Now I'm managing 5 restaurants. And it's like, there's a nuance to what you just said, which is you're managing 5 restaurants across, I don't know what kind of geography. So honestly, sir, that's impossible. You are managing 5 general managers that have to manage their stores.
Yes.
And as simple as that sounds, how that actually shows up then in the behavior, that nuanced difference in understanding.
This person's probably parachuting in and they're acting as if they were the GM,
overly
coaching or critiquing. Just as if, well, you're not doing it the way I would be doing it.
Yep. And when you would talk to leaders who have successfully made these transitions, they are actually operating as a regional manager, actually operating as a divisional leader, and not operating down a level. They'll even call it out, right? They'll even be able to say, that person, he's not operating that way. But what ends up so what I've seen happen at most organizations, and I was so surprised that General Mills was doing something about this. So again, shout out to them. Most organizations, we spend all this time in talent reviews, like I was leading, right? And you think about it, you've got 5 to 10 leaders, maybe director level, maybe VP level, start to put an hourly rate behind that, right? You're asking these people to do all this pre-work to kind of evaluate their talent, then come together for anywhere from a 2-hour to a 2-day conversation, identifying high potential talent, talking about what their development areas are, identifying successors, what are their development areas. And then in most organizations and all the people that I've talked to outside of the companies that I've worked with, I've gotten zero disagreement about this sentiment, which is that most organizations, we promote someone, we send out their organizational email. Congratulations to Adam, who's now the director of blah, 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 welcome, or it's an internal promotion, right? So welcome Adam, or, shout out to Adam, send him your congratulations. And then behind the scenes, Adam gets a handshake or a high five and a go get him, Tiger. And that's about the most support that most organizations provide. And
where you're relying entirely on the manager to coach that person up and elevate. Right?
So now,
and maybe that person might not know how to coach at the next level.
They might not know. They might not be operating even at their level. They might not have the time, right? Yeah. They might not have the time. And that could be because they're not operating at the right level. They're out in the field doing stuff, right? They don't necessarily have the time for me to teach you how to be a director. I just need you to hit the ground running, which is why we go internal oftentimes versus external, right? And so some of the research, let me just point out some of the research that I have really taken a dive into since I stepped out on my own. So first and foremost, just the success rates of internal versus external hires, right? So, looking at kind of 18 months out or so, and some of this research comes from DDI, McKinsey. I've got some of it up on my screen here, so I'll shout out the researchers because I'm not making stuff up here. But it's about 52% of external hires, right? At particularly senior leader levels, but I've seen it. I think it translates down at least to the director level. Depending on your company, director might be a senior level. But about 50 is about a 52% success rate. Now,
coin flip.
Our internal, yes, exactly. It's a coin flip. Now, our internal promotions, more successful, yes, about 65% are successful, looking at some of the research. But when you look at some of the research on promotions that fail, right, it's about 35% of senior leader promotions, internal promotions, that flame out by about month 18. Right. So, and to put it in the simplest terms, and I'm going to round down and make it super simple. It's about 1 in 3. Out of every 3 promotions you make, you can almost count on one being on a PIP by about month 18 and us sort of managing them out of the organization. And if you think about the amount of effort that it might actually take to support someone in that transition, the amount of time and effort it would take to support that person in, you can think about it in a number of ways, but like changing their mindset, skill set, tool set from one level to what's needed at the next, kind of going back to, and I can't remember who the researchers are, but the transformation trilogy, right? At every transition, at every transformation, there are skills. There are skills that you need to either keep using because they're going to be really helpful at this level.
Yep.
Important to also figure out is what things. So you were the whiz bang salesperson, but now you're managing 10 salespeople. You might need to let go of some of your sales skills, right? Not necessarily the skills, but how much time maybe you're allocating to sales.
Right.
Because these 10 people need to be focused on that. Right. So what are some of those skills you need to let go of? And what are some of the things you need to learn that you didn't know, right? You're now maybe presenting at the board or presenting to the C-suite. And I've never done that before. I might need to add some skills, there. Right. So at every level. So I know I picked on first level leaders, but it's even going director to VP or VP to C-suite. There are those things you need to add on, let go, or preserve. And most people have to figure it out on their own.
And this reminds me of Lawrence Peter, who was, I think he was a professor at USC, but he coined the term, and it was meant as like a joke at first, but people are promoted to their level of incompetence.
Yeah.
And because he just kept seeing it over and over again that, oh, you're an IC and you're our best sales guy. Let's put you in as the sales manager. Oh, you crushed at that. Then clearly you can be a sales director.
Right.
Oh, let's move you up. You could be a VP. Could you be a chief revenue officer? And of course, looking backwards, if you take a look at all the C-suite people and trace back their trajectories, you see nothing but success.
Mm-hmm.
But how many other people attempted that same trajectory and didn't make it?
Yep.
And anyways, I think I haven't read that book, but I think his students and other faculty encouraged him to build it out. Yep. But it reminds me of some of the stats that you're throwing out where, again, it is definitely not a lock that someone's going to be successful.
Right.
But how do we use behavioral science and how do we use just all the lessons in supporting managers, in, coaching, executive coaching, et cetera, to increase the probability that somebody's successful? And I think, again, whether, the manager themselves can do that, if HR can do that, if it's a third party external consultant, I think one other proxy for me, because again, that IC to manager is such a classic one, reminds me of like being a parent. So I have a 6-year-old at home, but it is this A-B, either you are a parent or you're not. And it's kind of the same thing in the working world. Either you're an IC or a manager. And man, once you've blown through that door and you've seen the other side, like you there's so many positive things that come from it. But it changes fundamentally your orientation.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I'll go one step further with that analogy too. To say,
let's go.
I've got 3 kids, right? And I
don't know how you do it, brother.
I
got
one. One of them is out of the house, so that helps for sure. But the lessons from one are only so applicable to the next one because the next one is a completely different human, right? And then, so that similarly, even with parenting, there are the skills you need to preserve. There are the skills you need to what worked with child 1 is just not working with child 2. I'm going to have to stop trying that and learn something new that's going to work with this child on whatever, esoterically or hypothetically.
Well, and go all the way out to, one of our friends, again, sorry, I'm not allowed to name dropping, but I'm thinking of like John Pike, prolific father, wonderful coach. And I bet you anything from going to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, like you're learning tons, or somebody who has twins versus one, like, so all unique situations, just like somebody who's at namethatcompany.com and they go from a manager to a director. Now, again, no one has ever been in that situation before. So how do we increase the probability that person's successful? And it sounds like, again, things that you learned at PDI and Korn Ferry, things that you learned at a multitude of Fortune 500 companies. And now that you're on your own, regularly coaching, putting out content, talking with different Fortune 500 companies, like it's clear, like better support leads to better outcomes.
Yeah. And on the one hand, you see that when you're internal, you see the support that external hires are getting. Now, usually I usually say, well, we give internal promotions 3 to 5 times less support than we give to external hires. Now, when I say that, I get both head nods and eye rolls in the same person, because they're like, yes, they do get 3 to 5% of the very little we're even giving to external hires.
Okay.
Right? Most HR people would admit there's way more we could do to help onboard mid-career, professionals from mid to senior level leadership roles.
Sure.
Much more
But we're
we can
busy.
do that.
We have
But
no
we're
money
busy,
and we're busy.
and yet this talent, again, I'm going to go back to, we've spent hours with multiple people at multiple levels of leadership, identifying talent, putting together development plans, identifying successors, putting together their development plans. We're sometimes enrolling people in programs, right? So sometimes we're enrolling someone in a leadership program in the hopes that that's helping to prepare them, teaching them some of the skills that they need to learn. What I see most organizations do is they might have a marquee program that they earmark for newly promoted people, but they end up building that program with a really high cost consultancy. And well, we have to wait until we have 12 or 20 promotions before we can enroll people and launch that program. Well, then what happens? What happens is then you've got, let's say there's 20 people, 5 of them have now been enrolled for 18 months, right? They're already approaching that unfortunate failure point for the 1 in 3.
Right. You're educating them after the fact.
Yep. 5 are new, and 10 are somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 12 months, 6 to 12 months or so, right? So you're still not hitting them at that point of greatest need, greatest vulnerability. And so if you just think of it as just an insurance, okay, so let me go to the other. What's really fun to look at is, the numbers that get thrown out for the cost of failure, right? So I've seen anything from $200,000 to $600,000 to $5 million. The research from McKinsey shows a pretty broad range, 425, going down to the level of, for a $200,000 a year executive, the cost of a failure is about 420. It's like double, right? All the way, so 2.5x the salary or whatever. But you also have to look at, so it's somewhere in the range of $200,000 to $2 million that you're putting at risk when someone fails. And why is that? It's not just the leader leaving, maybe an empty seat for a little while, but also then what does that do to the team? Right? This team that had a leader is now having a leader turnover. It tends to lead to more turnover on that team, lack of engagement on that team, so dropping productivity. If it just so happens that leader was involved in a critical strategic project, now we're also looking at, what's happening with this strategic project that's getting all this investment from the organization with this leadership gap, right? So you're putting key projects at risk. If this is a revenue generating role, you're putting customers at risk and revenue at risk, right? So you're risking, and I start to think about smaller companies too, right? I feel like even smaller companies have so much more to lose here, right? When, so many fewer people, we're talking smaller dollars compared to some of the giant organizations that I've worked in, right? One leader, customer impact could have a huge impact on your whole business, right? Just one leader failing, or a team having extra turnover because of a leader failing, right? Not let alone the cost of any possible severance you've got to pay out for exiting that person, maybe a search cost for finding the next person, maybe a sign-on bonus because you're trying to get this person in quickly. It just costs organizations a lot, right? And I'm looking at the time, so let me net, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, this feels a lot like an iceberg, right? I mean, so again, there is the tangible, visible, hey, what did Susan make, right? So, $195,000 a year. And if you just take that over, that's a simplistic, right answer. So what you're pointing to, lost productivity, opportunity costs, you passed up somebody to put Susan into that role. So again, their motivation's already down, and there's some I told you so energy on the team, but there's all of these ripple impacts that start to push overall organizational team performance down. It's just unnecessary headwind. And I felt this at Autodesk, again, I don't know if I, got a medal for most bosses in my tenure, but
Oh yeah.
nine bosses in 6 years.
That's
So
true.
it was a lot. And a combo of internal and external. Again, I learned a ton. I learned something from every single one,
Yeah.
but it was unfortunate to see that oftentimes it didn't feel like that person had the support they needed to be
Mhm.
successful. They were continuously being thrown kind of in between a rock and a hard place, asked to do an impossible task,
Yeah.
build the plane while it's flying with zero context. And within 6 to 12 months, some other larger organizational change outside of their remit would impact them.
Yeah.
So I suspect that there are lots of people listening to this that either went through that themselves or have seen somebody go through something like that, where there's just unnecessary change, transition, churn, etc. Sometimes even with great support, again,
Yeah.
it's not going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But too often, I think,
Yeah.
again, when it could have worked and we
Yes.
just didn't quite have that person's back,
Yes.
man, I can think of a couple leaders that I wish they had just a 10% more lift
Yep.
could have made the difference of that
Yeah,
person
that's the
sticking
thing is like,
around.
you're not gonna get to 100% success, right? But can you go from the research again, the research is a 35%. And so I could say 3 to 4 out of every 10 promotions are going to fail. It's just easier to say and round it down a little and say, 1 out of 3. So 35% is what the research says will fail. You're not going to get to 0%, right?
Sure. But
Now,
could we knock that? What's it worth to knock it
can you
down
get to
to
90?
three,
Can
to
you get to
two and a half,
90%
to
success? Yeah,
one?
10%. Yeah, exactly. How close can you
Exactly.
get? Now, because generally speaking, I don't believe it to be a selection problem. Like, could
Mm.
succession processes, could high potential identification processes be improved and tightened up? Are we always truly identifying high potential leaders and truly differentiating from high performing people? No, we're not always doing that great. Could that improve? Sure. But is just tightening up your selection criteria going to bring you from 35% failure to 10 or 5% failure? I
That's
doubt
not
it.
the low hanging fruit. That's
No.
not the major deficiency here. Yeah.
Yes, I would actually say most organizations are probably getting the decision making side of it right.
Mm.
Where things are falling apart is, are we helping this person truly leave the old role behind and step into the new role and what's required there, right? So what can you do about it?
Yeah, yeah, and
Now,
maybe this is a good transition point to like advice, right? So on the
yeah,
show, I always talk about kind of career stories. We talk about different topics. I feel like
yeah,
we, heard your story, heard some of your thoughts, seen some of the research.
yeah,
So the last chapter, if I'm not mistaken, as a step up fan
yeah,
here, to get into the advice.
nice
So
column,
yeah,
yeah.
what is it that someone, new leader themselves, someone supporting new
Mhm.
leaders, or again, other consultants
Let
out
me,
there coaching? What
yeah.
what what advice do you have?
Well, let me step back for just a second and say, what can organizations do about this first and foremost? Well, you could hire a coach. You can, and maybe
Mhm.
should. I actually would be a huge advocate for it. Working with some of the bigger houses, you're going to end up paying 20 to 30 grand for 6 months of coaching. And I would say, even in the case of this being on the lower end of a loss, right? Let's say we think this loss is, a $200,000 failure. Even 30 grand against that it's only 15%. And so, from an insurance perspective, even if you were to hire a $30,000 coach, $30,000 to save yourself the pain of 200, 600, or even a $5 million cost
Yep,
of
it's a
leadership
hedge.
failure, it's a drop in the bucket, right? So from an insurance perspective, let alone if you work with an independent like myself, like yourself, where you're probably landing around $15,000 or 10 to 15, somewhere in that range for 6 months of coaching. Let alone maybe a more purpose built coaching that might even be more affordable. Um, what I like to do is get in and do something more scalable, where we can actually set up more of a flywheel where, at a large enough organization that's having enough promotions, if you can provide both the individual support through some kind of a mini coaching with some kind of a curriculum focused on what are those goals, what are your development needs, how do we help aim your development there, and help you through some of the cycles of what are some of the things that typically fall apart for people, right? Like, are you
Mhm.
understanding your new network of peers and how to get to know them, where they impact your work, where you impact their work, how do you build a base of influence? Um, there's a lot to it there, right? So coaching, mini coaching, get something more systemic where maybe you can even bring people together in a cohort who are somewhere in this journey of their first to their 18th month, where they can even share what they're learning from one another. So those are things that I both advocate for and do. But to the advice, so what's my best advice for individual leaders out there? If you've been promoted and you're about to step into a new role, my best advice is don't be shy and don't feel, because one thing I was just writing yesterday, I want to say, is what ends up happening is people feel like I need to prove myself. I shouldn't ask for help. I shouldn't say I don't know what I'm
Mm.
doing. So when things start to get rough, I white knuckle it. I don't ask for help, and I end up making things worse. Right. And so what I would say is have transparent conversations with your leaders. Seek an advisor, seek a mentor, and ask specific questions about making the transition from your previous level to the new level. Like, how should I be doing things differently at this level than how I would have done them? If I'm a manager, if I'm a manager just being promoted to director, ask a director, maybe someone even in their first couple of years as a director, and someone more tenured as a director, to say, listen, I knew how to do this as a manager. How do I need to do things differently as a director? What things do I need to be doing differently as a director? Acknowledge that it's different and seek advice, right? That's the first thing I would say, let alone, finding out what, is that mentoring? Is that seeking out an advisor? Is that asking for a coach, right? Know that you're not alone, but also know that, like, white knuckling it, not asking for help is probably the recipe for
The
disaster.
worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think about my own where I'm at right now in my career, and again, uh, you know, released from corporate America. Okay, what's Adam going to do next? My wife and I built up a little Airbnb portfolio, some that we own, some that we manage for other people. But this idea of, okay, if we get a ninth Airbnb, is that going to change our life? Probably not. So I knew that place. That was me staying at the manager level. But
Yeah.
like,
Interesting.
what's the
Yeah.
bigger version of that? What's the scale? Like, how can I go up and grow? And it was to go into hotels, which are fundamentally different asset classes. It's still hospitality. I
You
can learn
said
a lot.
something.
I've got some skills, but look, the very first thing I do, to your point, was I got around people that are doing this, other students that want to make the same jump, and mentors that have already done it,
Yeah.
so that I could learn. So I knew, look, if I'm going to spend a year betting on myself and not getting paid to be at Autodesk or some other tech company, I owe it to myself and my family to put my best foot forward and make it more likely that I'm successful.
Yeah.
So anyways, like
Yeah.
whether we're talking about
No, and
hotels or we're talking
you
about your world, like I think that's great
you
advice.
said something really important there that I want to just put a finer point on too, which is, if you don't acknowledge that it's different, most people by default will just try to do more of the same, like more aggressively and harder, versus, to
Yeah,
your point, really thinking about what is the elevation,
different.
what is the thing that's new. So my advice to those who support leaders, so HR, talent,
Yo,
senior leaders, the hiring manager of a newly promoted leader. Um, so first of all, like HR talent, have that conversation with the talent manager to say, hey, this is a fundamentally different level. How are you planning to support them in stepping? This is kind of the whole title of my podcast here, and stepping up their game from one
yeah.
level to the next. Also have that conversation with that newly promoted leader. Like, hey, I don't know, is it Jim Collins? The title of that book, it fits all the time. It's what got you here isn't going to get you there, right? What
Oh,
got you
Marshall
here
Goldsmith.
is Goldsmith.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh yeah, Good to Great is the other one. But yeah, Marshall Goldsmith. What got you here is not going to get you there, right? So everything that was the table stakes to get you here, and only a
Yes.
small percentage of that is needed. Like, you need to tune into what's needed. So have that conversation with hiring managers. Have that conversation with the newly promoted leader to sort of let some of that steam out of the balloon and normalize that this is going to be different. Let alone, if you're in talent or HR, you need to be talking to the senior leader. That's the hiring manager of this new lead promoted leader to say, how are you going to support them in making this transition? Let alone advocating for things, advocate for some of the spend for coaching,
Yeah.
for some kind of program that supports leaders, right? So I would
Yeah.
say, like, let's not shy away from the conversation. And those who are supporting the newly promoted leaders, should be the vanguard of acknowledging it. And, it's like, you can't change a norm by not talking about it, right? You have to bring it into the light of day, right? So if you don't,
I love it.
yeah.
And look, just I was thinking when you were talking about, maybe normalizing the default as different. Because I think most people, again, okay, Rodney, you've been here for 10 years, you've been a great senior manager, we're going to put you in a director role. Like the assumption, like you say, is just, okay, you get to park slightly closer to the building, here are your 3 perks, maybe, and good luck. You're same person showing
Here
up
for
at the
now.
same office with the same people. And so it's really, really easy for the default to be, this is just an extension of what I did before.
Yeah.
It's way more visible, by the way, when you change geographic locations or change functions or change businesses. I'm actually coaching somebody, I won't mention the person or the name, but a tech company, now Autodesk. We're engaged in a 6-month coaching thing. And again, knew all the people in business A, now all of a sudden is moving to an entirely different business function. So just they have none of the same peer set.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easier in those moments because just everything is new.
Yeah.
For people to get it that this might not work. And I really have to think about this as different and new.
Yeah.
I think the real watch out at talking to you, consuming some of your content, hearing some of the stats here, is this pernicious little idea that tomorrow is going to look a hell of a lot like today in these transitions, right? And if we believe that, again, we just double down, we white knuckle it using your language, we push the accelerator down to the floor, we try and go faster and harder through it.
Yeah.
And that's the exact wrong approach. So anyways, kind of a new insight based on this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and so what I would say is, obviously part of all this is why I started the podcast, was right to give some more nuggets out there about what good leadership looks like. I write a couple of newsletters. One newsletter is kind of specific to this topic. I do a lot of my writing around this topic on LinkedIn. I'm starting a monthly webinar. So I think by the time this comes out, the second one will be done. Pretty dedicated to this process. So I continue.
Yeah, tell us more about the webinar. What's going on with the webinar?
Well, again, I think this will come out after the second one here.
Okay.
So a title subject to change each month. October's is going to be called, why 1 in 3 promotions fail and what it costs you, right? So trying to share more information about my own observations, what the research says, what can be done about it. I'm certainly trying to, I've got a roadmap on my website, which I think my pre-recorded intro and outro both mention this. It's called the Promoted Leader Playbook. I've pulled my own observations together, both from HR, my time at PDI and Korn Ferry, in terms of, what should you be focused on in month 1, 2, 3, once you've been promoted. So I would say go out to my website, kent.coach. If it's your first time there, you'll get a pop-up for the playbook in the first 10, 15 seconds you're there, or kent.coach/playbook to go straight to where to download it. And then, trying to also just give as much away too. Like, when I'm bringing people to these webinars, am I just trying to get them, am I trying to get them to hire me? That's not my only goal. I also want to give. I'd rather people do something new and different. And so I'm trying to give away as much of the secrets as I can so people can put some intentional focus here. And if that means you want to have a deeper conversation with me around other ways that you can sort of try to solve this issue, or even ways that I can support, right? It's certainly trying to open that conversation, but it's not the only goal. I would rather change the world by giving some of this away as much as I can too.
I love that thinking it's about generosity, adding value first, trying to literally give away the sauce. Like if I could write a little PDF that, some people would pay tens of thousands of dollars for, what would that say? And again, I've downloaded the playbook. I think it's awesome. It blends together, just as you said, kind of best of kind
I
of
think
professional
a
service
smart
thinking
enough
and
person with
your
the
own.
time, smart enough person. I mean, an average person should be able to take that playbook, and if they never wanted to hire a consultant, should be able to take that and put something together more systematic than what
Yep.
they're doing today.
Yep. And you're reminding me of, a conversation I was listening to the other night where an EVP had been promoted, I think, to maybe a different portfolio. I think they're a private equity shop. They kind of turned around this business, did what they needed to do, and then they were going to move on. And this EVP, if people are interested, I could try and pull the clip, but he was sharing a story about he sat down on his last day, right? So he's leaving the business. And he's been remarkably successful, high credibility. This is, for all intents and purposes, a promotion to the next thing, the next frontier. I think actually he got his first C-suite job. So, anyways, he sits down with his VP and he asked him a very interesting question. He said, "I'm going off to do this thing. Like, based on your experience of me, what's something that I could do differently, in this new role?" And the guy paused for a second and he said, "Look, you're going to go on to be a great leader. The only thing that I wish it could have been differently is if you would have invested more in me."
Hmm.
And that just like stopped him in his tracks because, like so many people, we get so busy, we're so focused that we're the hero in our own story, and we forget the incredible impact that we can have for others when we put our focus on service and impact and being open and curious and thinking about how is everyone's experience around me right now. And I think when I think of, again, good to great Jim Collins, level 5 leaders, they look at themselves when there are mistakes or failures, and they look out the window, right? So at the mirror in the window, they look out the window when there's success and triumph.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was just kind of a beautiful story that I think kind of hopefully ties into this conversation about lots of people are successful and move on. But even in that guy's case, he missed something, right? There was an opportunity that he passed up, and now the time is over. So he's dedicated the next couple of years of his life in giving back as much value to other people as he can. Yeah. And I hope whether you're a new leader, supporting new leaders, you're a coach thinking about this space, that again, we're not just thinking about our own impact. We're thinking about people's experiences and how we can enrich and grow that. So anyways, with that, any closing words, Ken? I know we've been going for a while.
No,
this has been valuable, but
that's all I got. If I'd said it again, I'm just going to say what the pre-recorded outro is going to say anyway. But thank you, Adam, for coming on and being the guest host for the day.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Any lessons being on the other side of the fence? I mean, sitting on the other seat, in the other seat? Any quick reflections?
No, I think continuing to make sure I probably gave myself less prep time coming up with this idea the night before. So I think, continuing to make sure that I give people a runway to prepare. I think that's the biggest. Yeah.
I love it, man. Well, dude, you were great off the cuff. So again, thank you for sharing with the people your story, what you're passionate about. Again, if people want to, you're listening to this, so obviously you found my guy, Kent Kniebel, the legend in this field. He's done all the things, but anyways, thanks again for sharing the mic with me today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks. I look forward to having you on and getting my chair back.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. Take care.